This tutorial will review creating arrays with classes. So we're going to get started by creating a new project. We're going to create another Windows Console project, C#. I'm naming this project ArrayAsField, and I have it selected where I want the project to be saved. Okay, so let's look at the directions here. And it says the first thing that we should do is create a Windows Console project that includes a class name group. So let's go ahead and create our class name group. So I'm going to come up here a little bit, and I'm going to go to project. We're going to add a class. As instructed, we're going to name this class group. Okay, so we're going to make sure we follow exactly what they're saying, what they want us to do here in the instructions. So it says the group class should have two fields, a string group name and a string array members. So we'll first create our first field, which is said it should be of a string data type, and it should be named group name. We've done that. The next one says we should be creating an array named members, and it should also be the string data type. So we should say string members. Do that. Then it says that each group is allowed to have 4 members. So we'll say equals string 4, enter. Oops, I'm sorry. We need to add the new keyword. Perfect. Now it says create a default constructor that assigns empty string to the field members. So we're going to create a default constructor. We know that constructors have to have the same name as the class, so we'll say public group. If it's default, it does not have any parameters. So we need to make sure that it assigns an empty string to the field members. So we're going to just use a for loop for that, and we're just going to say int equals I, or int I equals 0. Set up a counter variable, and then we're going to say that counter variable is going to be less than 4, because that's the amount of values we have in our array. And then we're going to increment I by 1 every time it passes through the loop. And then we're going to say here that members I is going to be equal to string.empty. Alright. So the next thing we need to do is create a parameterized constructor that passes in a string array that will hold the member names. So when you are going to parameterize a constructor, you need, of course, have the constructor name, and we're going to pass in an array of the member for string members. So it's going to say string, same way we have here, and we're going to say member names, and we'll say enter. So if you pass in, if you call the group constructor with an array of member names, then we can do another for loop that's, and I'm just going to do lazy programmer here, if you don't mind. And then I'm going to say that members I is going to be the equivalent, not empty, but member names I. Okay. So now if you pass in an array of names, it will assign those array of names to this array. So now that we have assigned the member names that we're going to pass to our constructor, we have them assigned to our group class members array. Now let's go ahead and output those array names, or those member names, so that way we can ensure that the array has been populated. we're going to use a ForEach loop. Now, understand when using these loops, if you need to assign a value, you're going to want to use the regular for loop where you have a counter and things like that. Now, if you just want to display the information of an array, then a ForEach loop would be, I think, the most effective. Or efficient rather. Okay, so let's go ahead and say for each. We're going to say for each. It's a string array. So for each member and members. And I'm giving these names so that way it's it's meaningful and gives you more of an understanding of what's going on. So for each member and members, we want to just pretty much write out what the member name is. So we're just going to say console.writeLine member. Okay. Semicolon. All right. Now the other thing it asks us to do before we go back to our program.cs class, it asks us to create a method that will return the member's name that corresponds to an index passed to the method. So we're going to create a method. We'll name it return member info. Return member info. It's going to pass an index value, and we know that index values are numeric, so we'll give it an integer data type, and we'll say index. And this method is not going to return a value, so we're going to use the keyword void. All right. Then we're going to hit enter, and then we can go ahead and determine what our method body should consist of. So the purpose of this method is to return information about a member in the array. Now to avoid the user making an error here, I would like to go ahead and use an if statement to make sure the user does not enter a value greater than 4, because I know that my or a value greater than 3, because I know that my array has 4 elements in it, and if it has 4 elements, though the index values of those elements has to be between 0 and 3, because even though it has 4 elements, you know the first element of all arrays is going to be 0. So I want to make sure that the user, whenever they do enter an index value to request a member name from the array, that they don't enter a value that's greater than 4. So I'm going to go ahead and put an if statement here. Let's say if the index value the user enters is less than 4. If it's less than 4, then we can go ahead and output the information that the user wants. All right. So we can go ahead and say member info, semicolon, and just going to say plus, use a concatenation operator to combine string of text with a value, and then we're going to get that value. So we call our array. Notice here this is our array name. Excuse me. This is our array name, and we put index here to represent our value. So as long as this is a value between 0 and 3, it's going to give us whatever element it's calling in that array. So we'll go ahead here, and we're also going to say toString. Just want to make sure we avoid errors. Alright, and then we're just going to add the else portion here. Just type in else, and console.writeLine index value is too large, just to let the user know that, hey, they entered a value that was greater than 4. So now that we've finished working on our group class, we want to go ahead and return to our program.cs. And so in our program.cs file, we know already that when we create our group, we're going to be passing an array of names, and we're also going to be passing an index value. So I recommend going ahead and creating variables to hold those values. So first, let's go ahead and create an integer variable for our index value that we're going to pass to return a member's information. Then let's go ahead and create a string array. We know already how to create our arrays. We need our brackets. let's create a string array with our group members names. So we'll just say group member names, all right? And then we're going to say equals new string, right? And we know what values we're going to put inside of our array. So we'll go ahead and go here, and I'm just going to write this here so we can see it on the next line. So we'll just go ahead and say John can be one group member's name. Mary, why not? Tim and Lauren. Okay. Then of course we need a bracket. A semicolon. Alright. So now we have the names that are going to go into that group member array. And we have a variable to hold our index value. So now let's go ahead and create an instance of the group class. So we're going to type in group and use it like a data type. We'll name our group red group. Alright. And we'll say new group. Now we know that when we're creating a group, creating an object from the group class has two constructors, alright? It has a default constructor, so we can create this group without passing any parameters. However, we know if we do that, then it's going to create a group with empty member names, or we can create a group object and pass an array of member names. So we're going to create a group object passing an array of member names, and this is the variable array that we're going to be passing. So we're going to type in group member name. I don't want to really like it. It says name and it's more than one, so we're just going to do one of those. Alright, so then we're going to have our semicolon that represents the end of a statement. So the next thing we want to do, after we've passed those names, we can actually, let's just test our program out to see what we have so far. We know that we need a console.read key to ensure the program stops and waits on us. So let's go ahead and select run. And so right now you can see where it's at least going ahead and it is outputting those member names based upon what we have programmed. And it's just a reminder, you can see here, when we go back to our group class, when we created our group and we passed those member names, we tell the program to do exactly that. First, go ahead and assign the array names that we received to our array that we created here, and then we say, hey, go ahead and output the values in that array. And so that's what you see is happening here. So the next thing in our project it asks to do is create that method that will return the member's name that corresponds to an index passed to the method. So we have already created that method. That method is here. Now we need to go ahead and use that method. So going back to the program.cs file, I apologize if I went a little fast. I was just showing you here that we've created our return member info method in our group class. And now we are going back to our program.cs class file to go ahead and use that return method from the group class. So we're going to go ahead and first, before we can use the method, we know that the method is going to require an index value. So we have this variable here that we've created, but we're not using yet. So we're going to go ahead and ask the user what index value should we use, and we're going to place whatever the user enters inside of our index value here. Now we know that the user is going to enter a numeric value. However, whenever you are typing into the console, or even if you're creating a application, Windows Form application, the input from the user comes in as a string. So if we want to use it in calculations, or we want to use it, have the computer look at it numerically, we need to convert it to a numeric value. So first, let's go ahead and get what the user entered. So we'll say console.readLine. Excuse me. All right. So this tells us what the user enters. Of course, we have an error here because it's letting us know that, hey, we can't convert from a string to an integer. All right. You see that there, from string to integer. So we're going to go ahead and say convert.toInteger. We're pretty much putting like a wrapper around whatever that user enters. Alright, a little bit of a wrapper there, and then we're going to end it in a semicolon. This way the computer knows that, hey, whatever the user enters, I want you to convert it and then put it inside this index variable. Okay, so now that we have an index value, now we can go ahead and call the method. You know what, I skipped one little thing here. Even though we have the value that the user is going to enter, it might be, courteous to let the user know what they should be entering. So let's enter a console.writeLine right above that index equals line of code, just so the user knows what they should enter. So enter something simple. Which member do you want to see the name of? Alright, and this, just for their sake, enter a value between 0 and 3. Okay, and then a semicolon. Just in case you can't see that all the way. That's all I got there. So right above index value here, I just pretty much did a console.writeLine so the user knows what to enter. Alright, so then when the user enters a value, it will be converted and then put inside the index variable. So now we can go ahead and call that method, that return member info method. Alright, so the name of our object is red group, so we would say red group dot, and you'll see the methods that we can call using the red group object. We want the member info method, and then when we hit the parentheses, IntelliSense is reminding us here that, hey, this method requires a parameter. You must pass an integer value that's going to represent, go inside another variable here, the index variable. So we're going to use our index variable that we created here and that we have also placed a value in that the user enters. So we're going to hit return, and I want to say that after we do that, we should be good to go. Let's run it and find out. So we run our program, and of course it lists all the names in our array, and then it asks which member do you want to see the name of. Enter a value between 0 and 3. We're going to enter the value of 2, and we hit enter. It says member info is Tim, and as you can see here, this would be 0, 1, 2. Yes, the second index value would be the value of Tim. And that is it for the ArrayAsField project.